Hello, my friends. We are going to be starting to do this thing called What Would Laura Do? Where you submit your questions, we have conversations, and I give you the tidbits and the behind the scenes that I give my insider communities. I'm going to hold space here. We're going to do this once a week. I'm not quite sure which day of the week, but right now we're feeling a Monday. So we're doing it right now, and I will give you more of a heads up when that happens so that you can submit your questions. But I did have some that came up over the weekend from my insider community, and one of them hit so deep. I actually just got off of an interview from a podcast, and we got on this topic, and I was like, well, let's talk about it here. Let's share it here. I know most of you are going to be watching the replay of this or be hearing this on the podcast. So hi, hello, come say hello. Share this with anyone that this vibes with. If you are new to my community, I am so freaking happy that you're here. We create magic on the internet and in your ears and all the kind of things. I am Laura Patricia Martin. I am a trauma specialist. I'm a dating specialist, really helping humans fall back on their hearts, because we live in a world where modern dating is all about projection and protection, and I just don't fucking subscribe to that. It's about emasculating people, men particularly, and women putting themselves on pedestals, and there's all these games and these confusion, and I just like to fall back in love with self. This is especially after trauma, right? That's what we focus on, is a lot of people that have been through PTSD, or they've been through these events that have happened, whether it's big or small. It's something that has happened, and you see it perpetuating in your cycle, and then that fear state comes in of how do I date again? What do I do? How do I show up? And so we dismantle that. We make magic out of it and really use that as a growth portal. This isn't necessarily where beginners come, but we're open to it. It's where you've done a little bit of healing, and it's not you're ready to embody it, break down these freaking walls and become tender and soft and do these kind of things, because we live in a left brain world. But how do we embody it? So it's magic here. I love it here. And I wanted to spend more time with y'all having conversations. So I'm tuning in here from Dallas, where it's rainy and cold. And I just came back from Mexico and Florida, and I'm confused. My body's confused. But I'm going to pour out my coffee. Well, I already poured out my coffee. I'm going to sip my coffee with y'all. And I'm going to answer this question on vulnerability, because who can friggin' relate, Okay, so this woman wrote in and asked me, and it was in my inner circle, and she was like, so I have vulnerability, right? What she was saying, and I'm kind of wordsmithing it because it was a voice note, but it was I have vulnerability, with my friends. This is something I've worked over the years, getting comfortable in sisterhood, and really being able to follow my heart and be emotionally honest, and, be in these containers. And in my work, I share my stories, I do my thing, and it feels really good. I'm able to do that from a selling standpoint, from a business standpoint, from a friendship standpoint. But when it comes to dating, my walls are up. I become so skeptical, and I shut down. I'm a little bit more quiet and reserved, and I feel like I can't express my needs, my wants, my desires in the way that I want them to be. And, it's I'm this version of myself that is watching this part of me go. It's this quiet little shy version of self, and then there's this inner dialogue happening where she's viewing it, and she's so how do I do that? Because now my partners are matching my skepticism, and things are slower, and it's this weird match. And she's I can see this ping pong match happening, relationship after relationship after relationship. So why am I vulnerable in one place and not another? And what can I do about it to become more vulnerable in dating? Because I do want to meet my match. Can you freaking relate? Can you relate? I remember feeling this exactly when I was coming out of my breakup and starting to date again. It was this version of bold and bravery and all the kind of things, and it was so easy with my work and all these other things to show up and be in these spaces, and then all of the sudden it's dating, and you're words no longer belong to me, and I want to be vulnerable, and I want to follow my heart, but what if you break my heart? Ugh, I don't know what to do. Can I pick up those pieces? I'm already going through all of these other quantum healing portals with money and business and growth and fitness and things like that. What about whatever? And so I get you, and the reason this is, relationships are our biggest growth portal. It's the one vulnerable space, not one, it's I would say it's the biggest one that we have, where it's to let someone love us, especially when we've been through things. There's no one in my world that has not been through something, that has had their heart broken, and they're skeptical, and they're questioning things and things like this. Of course, can you just let yourself sit in that space of course I'm afraid. Rejection is a real thing. Abandonment's a real thing. What if I give this person my heart and they don't want it? So let me pull back. let me protect. Like, that is how our brain works. That's our amygdala. It's always scanning for danger. That's our, RAS system. Like, it's always scanning for similarity so that we know how to protect. And that's why we continue to draw in these same scenarios, because even though, I'm going off on a tangent here, even though you don't want these emotionally unavailable men, I'm like speaking to her because I know who she is. We're going to land this. Like, even though it's emotionally unavailable men, like, that is actually where your nervous system is comfortable in. So it's like calling that space, right? Like, looking at that space of, why is this discomfort actually comfortable for me, right? Because it's not what we want. Ultimately, we don't want the emotional unavailability. And yet, if we are emotionally unavailable, of course, that's what we're a match to, because we're protecting ourselves and so are other people. So when we have these conversations around, like, I want to protect myself, and modern dating is so hard, and, no one wants to commit, and like, no one wants to commit because we're perpetuating trauma, and we're a bunch of traumatized 7-year-olds running around in human suits, and no one's taking radical responsibility over the fact going, actually, this cycle is going to end with me, and I'm not going to pass my trauma along to you, and I'm going to try and follow my heart. And of course, there's a difference of doing it, because there's 2 ways that I see this happen. One, let me take a sip of coffee. One, we overshare, which is a trauma response, where I'm going to love bomb you, essentially. I'm going to give you everything. I love you. Here, let me follow my heart. Like, it's good to be a little bit protected, and in a way, right? But another thing that I often see is this closed version of self, like witnessing life as it's happening instead of being an active participant in it, and then getting mad about the fact that we're not being an active participant in it. Right? And so we're sitting there having these conversations with self and being like, I don't understand. Like, I want to be a part of this. I want to be a part of this world. I want to follow my heart. I want to be okay. I want this person to, want to date me and do things. And then it's like, but my body is acting in this way. It's not like it's even an active choice. So one, looking at how soon has it been since you've been in a relationship? Because I can tell from my personal experience, like, when I had been single for 2 years, and this is what birthed sacred singlehood, like, literally me coming out of domestic violence, taking the time, and then being able to find love again, like, because it had been quite some time, I was so ready to follow my heart. And then it's so different now, where it has been, 6 months, 7 months since my breakup. And then it's like vulnerably dating someone again. Like, that one's a little bit slower. So don't judge yourself when something did take you X amount of time, and now it's taking you, I compare this to like a mile. I used to be able to run like a 6.5 minute mile, right? Like, now I'm like, we're walking that and it's going to take about 20 minutes. Like, I'm not, but we're still getting to the end game, right? Like, we're still headed on that path in that direction. So first, can you give yourself the compassion based on where you're at and looking at? And then vulnerability is truly, like, what I was saying on the podcast that I just got interviewed on, is it comes from filling up your life. Like, it's not going to go away. Those fears of rejection and abandonment, like, I've sat at the tables with some of the leading people in this industry. I've studied with them. Like, it's there, it's real, it's alive. It's one of the core wounds, especially as females, because when we were rejected from a community, and we were abandoned, we died. Like, that is our primal brains in act, right? Like, our brains are still a thing that we have to play into. And like, although we live in this society, like, our brains are still primal. So that makes sense, right? And then where in your life can you start to build more life, right? Like, we put life on pause for a person to come in, where it's like, oh, I'll do that, like, with a partner. I'll save going to Europe for that partner, or I'll get my body in this way, or I'll eat these types of food and go on these dates, or dress this way, or buy this lingerie, or do this thing when I get someone. And it's like, what? Why are you putting your life on hold for another person? Because then when that person comes, it's too much pressure. And that's why that's felt. It's like these self-protection mechanisms, because we've done these things, and then all of a sudden our real personality comes out, and then someone rejects us, and then we think, oh, it's because of that. It's like, no. It's because we didn't come into a situation being honest about who we were. And then over time we started to let that come out, and that happens because we were wearing a mask. And it's not that your mask isn't good. It just wasn't a match for that person. And because you didn't let yourself be seen and held in the space in the beginning, it came out a little bit later. It's not this like blind, oh my God, what did they do? I met their family and our friends met and it's been this amount of months and all these kind of things. It's like, you weren't honest about who you were. You were painting the picture so that you would get chosen. And once you were chosen by this person, they chose someone that wasn't you. They chose your mask. And then when you wanted to start being vulnerable and open up your heart, it's like, and it's not you. It was the picture that you painted of who you were before. Does that make sense? And so when we're looking at these things, it's like, can you fill up your life so much that before a person even comes in, like, of course we have to make space, there's this whole time thing, but like before even a person comes in, you're so filled up on life. Like, go and travel and eat the foods and dress the way you want and buy the lingerie and speak the way you want and get comfortable in your skin and do these kinds of things. Because when we step into a relationship, the scary thing about vulnerability is like, well, what if they leave? Then what do I have? It's like, well, if they leave, you're still okay. So might as well show up in the full capacity of who you are and see if that's a fit, as opposed to rejecting self. And this takes time, right? Because your neural pathways are built for protection. That is like, if you think of your brain like a jungle, you've already had neural pathways of protection in the way that you communicate, the way that, we play this quote unquote game of dating, like that's already laid down. So when you're building, it takes time. Just like if you were to go through a jungle and you gotta machete shit down, like, be patient, be kind, be loving to yourself in the process of this. And, take the pressure off of it. Like, being vulnerable is brave. To me, it's one of the bravest things you'll do, because you're risking getting hurt. But instead of that being a hindrance, can you see that as a portal to something deep? Because each time, like dating, it's learning about yourself. It's not about them. It's who are you in the process of meshing with another, growing with another, learning from another. Like, who are you? How are you communicating? What is it do you express your wants, your needs, desires? Are you seeing where your edges are that you didn't know that were there, especially as you step into new relationships, which I know is something that you're doing. Like, as you're stepping into these relationships, are you witnessing, oh, there's an edge. What do I want to do about it now? Instead of sitting in the spaces and going, my lips are chapped, sitting in these spaces and going, oh, well, that's just me. Or like, I'm witnessing this, and I get it, and this is why I love my communities, because it's people getting in the arena when they notice their edges. It's like, I'm not fucking doing this anymore. I'm ready. I'm stepping into this portal. I'm doing this kind of thing. I want to be more vulnerable. I want to be tender. I want that feminine energy to come, because that is what feminine energy is. It's vulnerability, right? And the cool thing about this work, because the alternative question that I also get in my communities is like, how do I get my partner to be more vulnerable? And it's, you create that pathway. Like, you model what you want. You don't mirror the closed offness. And we do this, right? Like, oh, they didn't text me back, so I'm going to wait extra long to text them back. And we're kind of ping-ponging this. We're mirroring back their triggers, right? So they're actually leading that part. But it's like, if you want something new within your relationship and you want some vulnerability and conversation, it's like, don't just jump in and do all these kind of things. And if that's not what you've done already, like, if that's not your personality, for me, that's my personality. Like, I jump in and I ask the deep questions straight away. Because I want to know and I don't want to waste my fucking time, and I like to know the people around me, and I'm very comfortable doing that. Like, when I do it, it's not in a space of like need. It's just like, this is welcome to my kitchen table, and these are the kind of conversations that we have. They're very different energies. Yeah, and I don't know where I was going with that. I just kind of got lost with my coffee sip there. But when you are, the delivery and the conversation, I know I was talking about, what was I talking about? This happens when you're a channel. Anyways, recenter. I'm not sure I lost that one. Oh, modeling and mirroring. There we go. So when you come in, you are mirroring back their triggers. And sometimes, yes, we want the man to lead us and we want to do all these kinds of things, which is what we hear a lot in the spiritual world. Like, I want a masculine man to lead me. But it's like, if they're not leading with vulnerability and that's something that you want, you can enter into the container and you can talk and go, Like, ask better questions. If you're not getting met and your emotional needs aren't getting met and we're not having the conversations we want to have, that is your responsibility to ask better questions that can make you more comfortable, right? Like the guy that I'm seeing now, it's like, what is our radar? Like, how comfortable do we feel? And so that we can check in. And my comfort level is lower than his, right? Like, he hasn't been in a relationship for a while. It's been quite soon for me. And so it's like, how comfortable do you get? And it's not yes, it's a team where he gets to make me feel comfortable, but it's ultimately up to me to how do I want to grow in comfort with this person? How do I want to be more vulnerable with this person? What is a way that I can start to do that? How do I want to open myself up? Right? And that means having harder conversations, laying in bed after sex and having conversations that are open and vulnerable, or like when something is bothering me or when I'm activated, it's just like, hey, this is how I'm feeling right now. Like, I know this necessarily isn't yours, but whatever. And sometimes I don't have to have the conversation. Sometimes it's just a you thing. Like, you have to deal with it. But if you want to open it up, it's like, model what you want. Share something about yourself. Have a wine night. Sit like you would one of your friends and just talk. We live in a world where everyone's wearing a mask trying to sell someone something, and we think just when we meet someone, like, all of this will hit some type of peak in our relationship and open things up. And of course, time, yeah, of course. But like, over time. But what would it feel like if you just entered being your authentic self? What would it feel like for you to express your wants, your needs, and desires from a safe space, and have that be met? Because you are so grounded in self. Because you are so grounded in who you are, and your life is so filled up, and you have the places, like you said in the beginning, that you can fall into, like your work and your people. Like, you have that laying down. And so if you actually look at life, it's like, it's okay. I get it. We want to be chosen and we want a partner because that's the chapter of life that we're in right now. And, it means a lot to us. But at the end of the day, you're okay. So if you were going into life from feeling as this is a secure place, how would a securely attached human go about having this conversation? How would a securely attached human go into the container of this relationship? What kind of questions? What kind of conversations? How would she dress? How would she act? Like, if you knew you're always okay. And this is how we start to have healthy relationship dynamics as well, because it's not so much pressure on that other person to be that number one person for you, to be your everything, and focus on all your things. And that's a lot of things. So if you can just fall on your heart and be that for yourself and find that in other communities, and then from that space, from a grounded whole space, just invite someone in, it's a lot safer. But if we haven't yet filled up all of our other containers and all of our things, we're going to get lost, and we're going to put so much pressure on this person, where of course vulnerability feels scary because it was ripped. And if it's ripped, then what do we do? And that's too many times that we see that in this world nowadays. It's a lot of pressure. So really looking at vulnerability as a portal of growth. It's the bravest thing to do. And the way to have bravery is you feel the fear and you take action, right? And it doesn't have to be a huge thing like asking someone to, marry you or move in or whatever it is that, like, we're scared. I don't know. The vulnerability by then I would hope is open. But, like, I don't know, what are we? Which is, I don't like that question necessarily, but, like, are you sleeping with other people? Is this exclusive? What direction are we headed? Oh, like, conversations. What are your values? What was your past relationship like? Like, what does love mean to you? What does being in a relationship look like to you? What is, your non-negotiables? What are your values? Like, ask better questions to get comfortable with that person, because the better questions you ask, the more portals you open up, the more comfortable you get, the more vulnerable you are. But if we're building these walls and we're afraid, what if they don't choose me because they find out who I am? Because this has happened one too many times, that over time they figure out who I am and then they leave me. It's like, then be you from the very beginning. From the very beginning, can you work on being yourself right then and there? Be too much. I know that's a big concern of yours, like, be too much. Let them see that so that they can fall in love with every part of you. no matter what. And if that's too much, that's too much, and there are billions of people in this world, and it's okay. It doesn't mean you're rejected. It just means they weren't the right one. And so over time, you grow this muscle, because at the end of the day, our nervous system is plastic. It molds, it shifts, it changes. And so choosing, instead of walls and blocks and things that happen because of heartbreak and trauma and life and family and all the things that, you've walked yourself through, choose to be soft, choose to fall on your heart, choose to understand the lesson, choose to be vulnerable. Model to the world what you want to see in it. Become the version that you want to be, the type of person you want to date. If that person is vulnerable and honest, protected, because that's what we do. We don't just spill and trauma response and love me as I am, all the kind of things that you hear. It's like, be smart, but open your heart. Do the questions. Know that you're the safest place to land. Fill up your space and your time and your life with so much joy and so much love that no matter what, you're okay. And always come back to that statement: I am safe. I am okay. My life is so full, and they're just a byproduct of my life being so full, and it's just an extension of who I am. And the more that I can communicate my values through questions and, demonstrating what that is, and, see if they're a match to that. Focus more on choosing rather than being chosen, and you open up, right? It's sitting in that space. And so I would honestly say vulnerability is one of the most important things for relationships. I would say it's the way that we shift this modern dating culture that we're stuck inside right now, of everyone protecting we think we live in a day and time right now where it's everyone's playing games. It's most people aren't, actually. Most people are protecting themselves. I'm sure you are. You haven't texted someone back, or you're like, let me wait, let me do this, let me not say this, let me, whatever. It's not a game. You're doing it because you've been hurt before. That's it. So if you want to create a safe space, if you want the world to match your vulnerability and your heart and your soul that I know is so deeply inside of you, model that to the world. It's not know that no matter, maybe someone has quote unquote played a game with you, but it's not a game, right? It's just self-protection. So can you give them compassion? It doesn't mean you have to tolerate them or keep them in your life, but can you give them compassion and then not repeat the same thing that they did to you just because of what they did? Can you do the work to release that, right? That's what sacred singlehood is. That's what that evolution is, to release the narrative, to navigate the in-between, to become a living sanctuary, so that you're a safe place for others to land, so that they can come to you with everything, so they can, it comes through practice. When someone comes to you and they say something to you for the first time and it's not the easiest thing, it's can you be soft with that? Can you hear them? Can you love them through that? Because if you go off the handle, they're not going to want to come to you anymore, right? So it's holding that space that no matter what anyone is doing, it means nothing about you. So might as well fall on your heart. Love with your full heart. Working that capacity, working that nervous system, working that trust of, okay, I can show them this, I can show them this, I can have conversations about this, and they match you there. And it's just growing that muscle and opening your heart and doing those things. So I hope this helps. I see a question here. First time I have had a tough relationship with my boyfriend, and now everything has changed. I think it depends on how we feel about ourselves. Most definitely. Again, it always comes back to ourselves. Our nervous system in our life is always matching where our nervous system is at, and our self-worth and our things like that. So yeah, of course. And that's the same thing with that's literally that's what I'm saying here with the vulnerability piece. It's if someone's closed off, can you reflect that back to yourself? Are you closed off? Are you, not being your full self? Are you keeping yourself protected in a way? And if the answer is yes, it's you don't have to open up right away, but what's the next edge? How can you start to take responsibility? And then once you're there, it's you get to be vulnerable. And if they're not matching and they're not modeling your behavior, then you get to choose to leave. Right? What if they don't do it too? It's well, then you get to leave. None of this is permanent. You get to match it. Be the example of what you want in this world. by leading yourself through it. It's scary, I get it. But you're the bravest fucking person I know. You are so strong. You are so brilliant. You've led yourself through some of the hardest things in the world. I know that. I've spoken with you. I know your heart. I know the feelings that you have. I know that. You care so deeply. That's why it's scary. But let that be your guiding force. Let that be the thing that makes you unique. Let that be the thing that you are loved for, because that's why I love you. That's why I see you. That's why I love being in this journey with you and all the things in between. Let that be your guiding light. You are so brave. Keep showing that to yourself. Okay. I love y'all. I'll see you next week for the next segment of What Would Laura Do? I will put a question box. There's already actually one in the stories, but we'll make sure to keep putting that up there so we can kind of go through them and batch them out and see how it goes, and put this over on our podcast, and we'll see it there as well. But yeah, let us know. I love you. If you're looking to jump into Sacred Singlehood, we start next week. This is the program that changes everything. Everything. We talk about body, where you understand how to nourish your body, and it's the part that I believe is truly missing from the healing heart space. Like, you can't heal trauma if your body's not regulated and safe, and that starts with nutrition. My background is IBS anxiety, so I still utilize those practices, and getting into understanding your nervous system states, and then we move into that healing space where you're actually, stretching your nervous system and things like that, and then we become the embodiment of it, so you genuinely don't have to think about it anymore. You're just naturally a living sanctuary. And from there, like, the women that have gone through this is at quantum speeds of, like, overcoming cheating, where, like, they used to shut down their life for months on end. It's like within weeks they're back to feeling like themselves, and cultivating relationships and starting new careers and asking for the promotions, and setting their boundaries and regulating with their family. Like, it's wild, the things that can happen when you put 2 feet in. So I invite you to come join us there. And if you're still in the beginning, because that's more high level integration, if you're still in the beginning stages and you want to learn more about your healing and, like, attachment styles and boundaries and breakups and codependency and things like that, we have the Healing Heart Bundle where you can tap in. That's a self-paced, more education forward program, or masterclasses that are bundled together. So you can find that. Everything is in the links or in the show notes wherever you're listening to this, and we'll be sure to have them there. But I love you so much. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited to hear and reflect back what you guys got from this. Make sure you subscribe. We have new episodes every single week. Share this with someone that cares about, because it truly is, that's how we get this out here. These things do cost money, and that's like our pay it forward kind of thing. So we thank you so much for that, for those that have shared and tag us in your stories and all that kind of thing. So I love you, and I will see you in the next episode.